You cannot attack a person simply by going full Bitcoin on them straight away, because they will not understand it. And then you just scare them away, because people, if they don't understand something, they're afraid of it and they will not touch it. I would say in the next 20 years, Bitcoin is going to explode in Europe. I think overall a lot more people will be investing in Europe than they are now doing.
Szia, Imo! Welcome to the podcast.
Szia!
Megteszed, hogy elmondod nekünk, hogy miért beszélsz magyarul, vagy hol tanultál meg magyarul?
Igen. Szlovákián születtem, és Komárom közelében laktam, és laknak a szüleim, és ott mindenki beszél magyarul, szóval én ott tanultam meg magyarul az óvodában. Ugyebár ott éltem gyermekkoromban, szóval sokat beszéltem magyarul, aztán amikor elköltöztem külföldre, Angliába, akkor ment végül is minden nap magyarul, szinte soha magyarul. Szóval már sok éve nem használom gyakran, ezért nagyon nehéz magyarul beszélni, és főleg szakmai dolgokról, Bitcoinról beszélni, munkámról beszélni nagyon nehéz lenne. Nem hiszem, hogy senkinek sem tetszene, szóval jobb lenne, hogyha angolra váltanánk, hogyha majd elkezdünk arról beszélni.
A mai epizódot az OKEX szponzorálta. Ha eddig nem tudtad eldönteni, melyik kriptotőzsdét használd Európában, akkor most tényleg itt az idő meghozni a döntést. A MiCA szabályozás miatt már nehezen elengedhető, hogy szabályozott európai előírásoknak megfelelő platformot válasz, és ehhez az OKEX most adja az egyik legnagyobb európai promóciót. Az új felhasználók akár 400 euró értékű bitcoint is szerezhetnek egyszerű appon belüli feladatok teljesítésével. Emellett új befizetésekre akár 8%-os bónusz is járhat egy 50 millió eurós jutalom keretből. Erre a már most meglévő felhasználók is jogosultak lehetnek, de nagyon fontos, hogy még az első befizetés előtt meg kell nyomni az opt-in gombot. Ha ezt kihagyod, a befizetés már nem vesz részt a promócióban. És ez még nem minden. Ha a kampány alatt nyitsz egy X-Perp számlát, 30 napos VIP hozzáférést kapsz, ami alacsonyabb kereskedési díjakat, magasabb jutalmakat és további előnyöket biztosít. Ha eddig a MiCA miatt kivártál, most egyszerre válthatsz egy európai szabályozásoknak megfelelő tőzsdére, és kihasználhatod az OKEX egyik legnagyobb promócióját. A részleteket és a regisztrációs linket keresd a videó leírásában. Okay, I think it's probably better if we switch to English because it's more comfortable.
Yes, please.
So could you please tell us about your journey a little bit, like what originally convinced you that Bitcoin was worth building a career around?
Of course, yeah. Well, to be honest, I got into Bitcoin by accident. I never really planned to work in finance. Bitcoin is finance. I never really enjoyed finance or talking about money. I was really interested in entertainment and the movie industry. And had you told me when I was 19 or 20 that I would end up working in finance, I would have laughed because of my disinterest in it. But I was born in Slovakia. I moved to the UK where I studied. I started my career in London. I worked for several companies like Xbox, PlayStation. Then I managed to work for Universal Pictures, which was my big dream. And then I realized that you need to be careful about chasing your dreams, because when they do come true, sometimes they're not as awesome as you think they are. I spent 2 years at Universal, but it really wasn't for me. It's an industry of extroverts, and I'm not super extroverted. I'm a little bit on the introverted side, but it's just basically all show. Even though they're not in Hollywood, it's all Hollywood and it's all fake. And then after 10 years in London, we moved with my wife to Vienna, where then I came across Bitpanda because I wanted to start working in startups after working for many years in corporates. And at the time, Bitpanda was not a very well-known company. Bitcoin was still not very well-known. It was 2017. So that was the first year where Bitcoin, I would say, broke into the mainstream in a bigger way. Up until then, really, there were no press about it whatsoever. It was probably only discussed on Reddit. And then 2017 was this shift where suddenly it just broke into the mainstream. And that's when I joined as well. So I started working at Bitpanda in January 2018. Just after it went to $20,000, Bitcoin went to $20,000 and then crashed down to, I don't know what, but it was
8,000.
Yeah, it was in red for a very long time. And then basically after Bitpanda, I really fell in love with the industry. I fell in love with the vibes, because it was very much these vibes of being a rebel, being against the system. And it wasn't like it is now, where you have Bitcoin and you have crypto. It was crypto against the banks. And the whole shift between splitting between crypto and Bitcoin came later. But that energy of like being really the underdog and being laughed at, like I had friends and family asking me like, what am I doing working for a Bitcoin company? Sounds like it's a criminal organization. Like nobody was taking us seriously. We couldn't get a proper bank account. Nobody was dealing with us as equals. It was very early, so I really like that vibe. And specifically, Bitpanda obviously is a huge crypto exchange. They also offer other cryptocurrencies, but I really gravitated towards what is Bitcoin about, I would say, the mission of Bitcoin, compared to everything else. So I knew that I want to continue working in Bitcoin after I leave Bitpanda. And that's how I discovered then Relai. It just so happens that at the same time as I was looking for my new job, they were looking for their first CMO. And yeah, I've been there ever since. It's going to be 5 years next month already. And it's been great. It's been a great journey. And being in the industry for such a long time, over 7 years now, almost 8 years. It's great. It's really great to see how much it has grown, and really great to see, how the new people came in, especially in 2021. There was this big wave of new entrants who came into Bitcoin. It's really great to see how far along it has become and how serious the industry is now compared to how it was in 2017-18.
Yeah, 2017, before the regulations, before everything, like the banks were like basically throwing everyone out who was in any way related to crypto. And we went through this kind of like similar journey here in Hungary with like a Hungarian exchange. Like we had to open a bank account every 2 weeks and then going around in circles with a couple of banks that we have here. But I remember that was the time where they blocked all the advertisements as well. So I wonder, like, how did you manage to scale to over 1 million users? Like, what was like the 2, 3 things that you could actually do to scale?
Yeah, the advertising was banned on the main platforms like Facebook, Google, and things like that, but it wasn't really blocked on other platforms. So if you wanted to advertise directly with some newspaper or TV, you could do that. That was fine. We, for example, did a campaign in the Viennese underground. So we had basically out of home posters in Vienna. We did like a laser out of home, like a light show, like what is it called? This, anyways, the laser thing on buildings. So, for example, we did a campaign where we we put the Bitcoin logo on the Bank of England. This was like 2018, 2019. So we had lots of cool campaigns that you can do. You couldn't use Google, you couldn't use Facebook, which at the time was still super popular. Not like now where it's pretty much dead, but that was really the heyday of Facebook and Instagram. And we couldn't use it, but that's fine because you could do a lot of organic stuff. So you could work with influencers through affiliate partnerships. That is a way around it, and actually it works really well. It works really well for Relay as well. And you focus on community building. You really focus on creating a community out of all the believers. And at the time, actually, because Bitpanda was one of the first big crypto companies, it gained a lot of followers and very loyal followers. And we built on that. And then we obviously added advertising on top of it. And then once the ban went away, then you were able to advertise them in a much more aggressive way. And they had a great product. That was the main thing. Basically, I do believe in this strongly. If you have a good product, it beats any other channel. It doesn't matter that Google blocks you. It doesn't matter that you cannot advertise on X, or you don't have a budget for expensive influencers. None of it matters. If you have a good product, You just need to find creative ways of how to get this product in front of people, and then the people will take care of it. If it's really good, they will recommend it to their friends. So at Bitpanda, the referral program was really important for the growth, and that's basically it.
Yeah, and to be honest, sometimes when you don't have a big marketing budget, it can be also a blessing.
Exactly.
Because with these big influencers, when you work with a couple of them, they don't really convert. And you are basically just burning money. And then, okay, you are raising brand awareness. And you can say that, okay, like we reached, I don't know, 500,000 people with that post, or 20,000 commented, but only like 5 of them actually signed up to use the product. Then when you are working with like micro influencers and they have like, I don't know, 100 or 200 followers, but that follower base is actually like something that they interact with on the daily, sometimes it's even more beneficial to actually use that.
Yeah, I think if you don't have an abundance of budget and you need to be limited, it forces you to be creative as well, and it also forces you to really just focus on the fundamentals, which a lot of companies forget. Things like just having a good landing page, a localized landing page, do your SEO, your ASO, now GEO, like just really just do the basics. That I call it the infrastructure, the marketing infrastructure. If you really like it's a slow burner. It doesn't give you instant results, but if you do that, then when actually the bull market starts, it's like a wave and it really carries you. You don't want to be underprepared when the bull market comes. And the thing is that you need to have this set up in order to be found organically. For example, at Relai, the organic channel, as if you can call it a channel, is our number one channel in terms of acquisition. Most people come to us because they find us or word of mouth. So that's either friends or some affiliates recommend Relai. And I disagree with the fact that influencers don't convert. They actually convert really well, but you need to go for the right ones. So speaking of Relai, for example, if we have strong partnerships with Bitcoin-only content creators, podcasters, and they convert really well. So you need to really go to focus and laser focus on Bitcoin. And then depending on the market, if it's a bull market, you can then go broader and you can focus on lifestyle influencers and tech influencers and people who talk about different topics other than Bitcoin. Because during a bull market, there's euphoria and everybody is interested in it. But when it's not a bull market, let's say it's a bear market or just a normal calm market, nothing exciting, that's when you need to always go really narrower and you need to go back to Bitcoin. So I always think of it like an onion with layers. You start with Bitcoin, that's the core, that's where you should really focus most of your effort. Then, if times are better, you can focus on crypto influencers, so people who talk about not just Bitcoin but also other cryptocurrency. The next layer is then finance, so people talk about personal finance. And then you go out of money and you go into lifestyle or tech. Those two also tend to work if it's a bull market. And again, if it's a bear market, then you go back all the way to Bitcoin. So they do work. You just need to find the right people. Obviously, not everybody connects, and you're right. If you find an expensive one, and let's say them not talking about Bitcoin as the main topic, then you can end up burning lots of money without any results. That's true.
So when you joined Relay, what was clearly missing that you knew that you could fix?
Well, they didn't have a marketing team to start with, so I knew that I can fix that. And they didn't have anybody to run their marketing. Overall, at the time, Relay just started out. They had been only a year at the market, so even the product is I would say like an MVP version. There was still some typos in the app. The localization wasn't great yet. There was really only social media marketing done, nothing really else. There was no SEO, no uh, not a great website, nothing really done in terms of marketing. So I knew that I can grow it because I've done it at Bitpanda. I know that it can be a success because I believed in Bitcoin, and by that time, being Bitcoin only actually was gaining traction. So I knew that it has a huge potential. We just needed to fix the product, and we needed to fix the marketing. So, and I'm really into both. I don't just think about marketing. I really like to think about the product as well, because I think that the two of them together are what really creates success. You can have really great marketing, but a shitty product. And if the product isn't good, the marketing brings the people in, but then they realize that marketing is just lying to me. I'm not going to believe these guys again because the product isn't good. Same way, if you have a great product but you don't have marketing, it's really difficult to let people know that the product exists. Between the two, it's always better to have a good product than good marketing. But the absolute ideal is to have a great product and great marketing together. And then success is just a matter of time and timing and the market. Because in a bull market, it is really difficult to, if you're retail focused, it is really difficult to grow. And you need to just basically be realistic and humble, not to kill yourself in a bear market where you just burn your budget because simply people are not connecting, they're not searching for Bitcoin. And yeah, it, to answer your question, it was everything because nothing existed at Relay at the time.
Yeah, to be honest, like as we both been through so many cycles now, I think the bear markets is just for you to survive. And if you have actually like a good product, once the bull market hits and you are like prepared for everything, then you can
Exactly.
just launch your campaign and then it's gonna convert. And then happy times, and then you can save for the next bear market.
Yeah, I
Um,
think you need to have a good product and you need to just position it well. I think what a lot of Bitcoin companies don't do well, and overall I think Bitcoiners struggle with, is Bitcoiners think that everybody's going to be a Bitcoiner. But that's not true. Most people will not be Bitcoiners. That doesn't mean that they will not use Bitcoin. They will definitely use Bitcoin. I think that 10 years from now there will be significantly more people using Bitcoin than there are today. I know it because when I started in 2018, now there's significantly more people using Bitcoin than they did in 2018. So the trend is very clear. But most people will not turn into Bitcoiners because most people will not care about what is on chain, what is Lightning. They will not care about anything that Bitcoiners care about. They only care about what can Bitcoin do to make my life better. That's what they care about. So that's what you need to communicate. You need to communicate not the features, not the technology. You need to communicate the benefit. This is how you, a regular person in Hungary, can benefit from Bitcoin. And you just sell that. We at Relay, we call it take control of your future, because Bitcoin allows you to take control of your financial future. And if you take control of your financial future, you take control of your overall future. You will have a better, less stress about money. If you change your mentality into a Bitcoiner's mentality when it comes to, the time horizon, everything becomes better. You become calmer, you become more successful. And I think that's what we're selling. And that works. But if you go out there and you start selling that we have the best app, we have the coolest features, that is all very subjective, because a best app can be something for me, but it cannot work for you, because for you something else is a best app because you like different features. So you really need to offer the benefit. And that's something that everybody can understand. You cannot sell the tech of Bitcoin to somebody who's a newbie because they will not get what you're talking about. But everybody understands that, this allows me to save Bitcoin, take control of my future. Great. I understand that.
how was the narrative different when you were at Bitpanda and you were basically like working with like a broader product, and at Relay it's a Bitcoin only product?
Yeah. The ambition was definitely much bigger at Bitpanda, and they always had plans to be the giant company that they have become. So, now they offer stocks, ETFs, precious metals. That was basically always what they wanted to achieve. They wanted to become sort of like an everything app, like Revolut is. and they just sort of went towards it from a different point of view. Revolut started with just transferring money abroad and then become a bank, and now they have crypto. Bitpanda sort of took it from a different angle. They started with crypto, then they added all the other assets, and maybe, I don't know, eventually maybe they will become a bank as well. So they just wanted to follow that path. And the problem with that is, I see several problems with that approach. One is, I don't want to work for a company that doesn't believe in something. I think believing in something and being a mission-driven company is very important. And it's very difficult to believe that you're a mission-driven company if you offer Bitcoin Cash and, I don't know, some monkey token or the Trump token. Like these are very obviously not serious investments. So to me, that never really sat well with me. That, how can you claim that you're democratizing the future of finance, but at the same time you offer super dangerous, shady products? That doesn't sit with me well with most of the companies that are sort of big exchanges. That's not to say that they haven't done a lot for Bitcoin. Even Coinbase, Coinbase is not very popular, but it has done a lot for Bitcoin. But to work for a company like that, it didn't sit well with me. What I like at Relai is that there is this singular focus on Bitcoin. We all believe that Bitcoin is the only thing worth spending your money and your time on, really. So that focus really, I think, makes it a lot more exciting. It also makes it, in a way, much harder, because if you have so many cryptocurrencies, every year or every cycle there is something else that's popular. So it was NFTs a couple of years ago. Before that, it was ICOs. So you could always offer something that is right now trendy, almost like whatever the popular flavor is right now, you can just offer it. With Bitcoin, you need to be a lot more patient, and you need to really build step by step, because you're building trust. With crypto, you build into hype. It's just really, okay, so all right, so this year Solana is very popular. Let's do everything we can in marketing around Solana. And actually, I know this for a fact, that most of these exchanges don't actually make money from Bitcoin. They make money from all the other products that they offer. Bitcoin is something that they have. They make some money from it, but it's never the top earner for them. It's always one of these popular things. And there lies the problem, because where does it stop? If you eventually start chasing the next hype, when do you stop adding more things and crazier things? Like where is the end if that happens? And with Bitcoin, it's just really simple, and it's just more patient, and it's more honest, and it really feels like you're just working on something that is morally good.
Well, we could argue that like they make more money on it because people tend to trade more shitcoins than Bitcoin. Because I remember back in the days when I was trading, I did trade Bitcoin for a little while, but like I would always go for the shitcoins rather. I
Okay.
would buy and hold my Bitcoin, but not not trade it if it wasn't necessary. Yeah, but anyway, how do you think that like regulations changed your strategy?
um, I have a controversial opinion on regulation, because
Okay.
most Bitcoiners really don't like it. But as a business, it's good for us. As a business, it brings clarity. You know how to predict future, because the laws are clear, so you know what to expect. You know what to need to work towards, and it also takes care of the competition in a way that if you don't do your homework and you don't actually put in the time, then you simply can't compete. So it really makes sure that the competition is strong, and it gets rid of all the companies that simply think that they don't need to do this. And I think that clarity from a business point of view is important. Now, that's not to say that I agree with the regulation. Uh, the thing is that it also obviously costs a lot of money for companies to get MiCA licensed. At the amount of things you need to do in terms of development to be compliant, and all the stuff you need to put into the app, like KYC flows and all these things just kind of bloat your product. You don't really want them there. They don't make the product better. So I don't agree with it personally. I also don't think that there should be such strict checks. I am not against laws and regulations. I'm just against too many laws and regulations. But as a business, at least it's clearer for us now what we need to do and what are the rules of the game. Before that, it wasn't clear, because if you wanted to operate in Europe, where we operate, and if you wanted to go to Hungary, you needed to get a license in Hungary. We wanted to go to Austria, you needed an Austrian license, and so forth for every single European country. Now you need to put in a lot of effort to get a MiCA license, and the same rules apply for each country. And it's very simple. That is good for business. What is not good for business is a fragmented regulatory landscape. And in the end, there is regulation. We have to live with it. We cannot go on without it. Very often I see opinions online which just say, just don't do it, just don't comply. But that is not possible. Like, I think people live in some fantasy world where they think that they can just not comply. It's like me saying, well, if you go to a supermarket, why do you pay for your groceries? Just walk out. And you can maybe get away with it a few times, but eventually you will be caught. Same way a business, we can just not comply and we can get away with it maybe for a while, but eventually we'll be caught. And then the business is liable, and the people who run the business are also liable. So yes, we have to comply. There's no way around it. And if those are the rules, then we need to play by those rules if you want to play this game. So yeah, I'm not in favor of it, but I'm not against it either. I don't know if this makes sense.
Yeah, it does, because it brings clarity. So it's possibly easier to implement some of the things that you've been working on.
Exactly.
And it actually helps. I mean, the market is maturing in a sense. So basically, what you were saying, that like now we are not selling the idea to people that, okay, like they can join this community and we're going to be against the system and everything is going to be like this underground movement, but your narrative is that, okay, they can buy a piece of their future financial security if they invest in Bitcoin.
Exactly. Most people, they just want to get on with their lives. They do not take the time. I mean, most people don't understand money at all. And, to talk to people about Bitcoin is really difficult when you first need to go all the way back and talk to them about why you should invest your money in the first place. Most Europeans don't do that. I think around 80% of the Europeans, they don't actually take part in capital markets. They do not invest their money. So you go from no investing to you should buy Bitcoin is really like a huge step for most people. So that's why also the Bitcoin adoption is slow. It takes a long time. What it has done over the 17 years is incredible. So many people who are into Bitcoin now and using Bitcoin, but obviously it's still slow. And also that's why you have these cycles where when the price drops, people freak out and they stay away. Like right now, retail is kind of dead when it comes to Bitcoin. It's because there is a lack of understanding of capital markets, and people understand volatility in a very negative way. People think that volatility is bad. In fact, I don't know if you had ever had an experience of going to a bank and them talking to you about your risk profile. And that basically there's just three categories: low risk, medium risk, high risk. What is your risk tolerance? And the way they phrase the question is like, how would you be comfortable if suddenly your assets drop like 5% in price? And oh no, I wouldn't like that. So then, yeah, you really don't have a high tolerance for risk. That's it. They they don't they don't talk about risk, about volatility as something that is actually okay and something that is short term, or something that can be an opportunity. They talk about it's volatile, therefore it's risky, therefore you maybe don't want to touch it. And then that's what they sell you in a bank. They sell you really low interest, almost cash instruments, because they are the least risky ones. while they don't push, ETFs, which are slightly better. They don't push the stock market because that is very risky. So Bitcoin in itself is super risky. And I think um, that is currently the problem with people, is that they're just simply just too afraid of it. So to talk about Bitcoin is a huge step. I always like to start, whenever I talk to somebody, I like to start talking about, are you even investing? Tell me what you do with your money. And then you kind of understand that, okay, why would I be explaining to them now that, Bitcoin is great because there's only 21 million and it's a fixed supply, and Satoshi Nakamoto and all these sort of things that is so far away from where they currently are. You need to approach it more from like, okay, so tell me about, what are your problems right now? Is it that you want to save up for a house? Tell me what you're doing about saving up for a down payment. Or you're not doing anything, you're just keeping in the bank account. Well, have you considered maybe just putting into capital markets? And then offer Bitcoin as an option. It's like, don't put everything into Bitcoin. I don't think that's good advice for somebody who's starting with investing, or moving away from safe investments, which is, there is no such thing. But I think giving them it an option as like, you should definitely buy ETFs. You should definitely look into the stock market, precious metals, and Bitcoin as well. And I think that is a much better conversation to have with people than to just tell them that Bitcoin is the only good thing, everything else is shit.
Yeah. I think we all arrive to that conclusion at some point, because when you arrive to this space, be it crypto or Bitcoin, at first everyone is trying to be the evangelist in the family, and then at some point you realize that like you just need to at least like wait for them to come to you for advice if they want to buy Bitcoin, and then otherwise you can start by talking about investments in general. So that happened to me as well. The same exact scenario that you just said. We walked into a bank with my grandpa because after I think 3 or 4 years, he was actually convinced that now he wants to invest his money. After talking about it for 4 years, and then he went to this bank, and then I was against him opening an investment account with the bank, but he wanted to do it. So it's like, okay, they're going to charge you like 2% for handling your money, which is not worth it. But okay, you do whatever makes you happy. We went in, they offered a couple of these investment portfolios. And then they said, okay, like he should do the lowest version, which brought around, I think, 3 or 4%. And I was like, that's not even hitting inflation. That's basically you are using his money, and he is even paying for you to use his money. It's like, we're not gonna do that. So basically, we asked them to hand out a list of stocks and bonds and ETFs that they handle, and then I put together a mix for him. And that's kind of like the highest risk that was possible at the bank. And then he actually made it 25% last year. So like, it's it's crazy. So I hope we are just one step away from Bitcoin. Like,
I think so. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there are also people who go from 0 to 100 when it comes to Bitcoin, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm all in." But I think that's really a minority. Most people, all they hear is, "Oh, I heard that Bitcoin is risky," and all this sort of fud. And I think most people confuse investing or saving with trading. And when people think about the stock market, they naturally think, especially people from like Eastern European countries. I would put Hungary there as well. We are taught from young age that like investing is risky. My parents thought of it that way, that investing is risky because you can lose all your money. And they always think about trading. With trading, you can lose all your money. But I always try to turn it around, and I really like using charts because it's a very simple narrative. If you just zoom out of any chart, any of the major sort of assets that have been around for the last, I would say, 30 years, if you have a chart like that, I like to just zoom out for the next 30 years and just show them this little dip is the 2008 financial crisis, and see how much it has grown since then. This is COVID, and see it continued growing. There was a dip, and all you have to do when it drops is just wait. And that is then also a conversation about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin works the same way. All you have to do is just zoom out, wait, don't touch it for several years, and don't panic when you hear that, oh my God, it's the end of the world and Bitcoin is dead for the thousandth time. And I think that's a good segue into Bitcoin, but you cannot attack a person simply by, going full Bitcoin on them straight away, because they will not understand it. And then you just scare them away, because people, if they don't understand something, they're afraid of it and they will not touch it.
So do you think that is it like, do you need to use a different strategy to build trust across different European markets when it comes to messaging on Bitcoin?
I think some messages work. So some approaches work universally across any market, really, which is, like I mentioned before, really don't be complicated. Don't speak in a complicated way. Break the message down to simple, some understanding that people have in their life. So try to bring the benefit that you bring to their life with your product. If your product is that they can buy Bitcoin, then try to tell them how would their life be better if they would actually use your product and invest into Bitcoin. What is it that, I think people like to see themselves in the future of, like, if I get this thing, it's like, if I get these sneakers, I'll look so cool. I can't wait to wear them outside. I will look so good. That is the image you sort of need to give people with everything. You need to paint them this picture of the future of, like, this is you with Bitcoin in the future. People can understand that. All the technical stuff that happens underneath it, you don't need to, like, you can explain it. You should have it somewhere on your website, but honestly, you will not sell anything like that. It's like, how would you sell a smartphone to people? You would not break down what is underneath it. You would try to sell the features of, like, how this makes your life better. You would not try to sell email by talking about the protocol underneath it. You would tell them that it's just, you open it, you type your message, and you send it to your loved one, and it's done, and it's there instantly, and then they can just reply to you the same way instantly, and it's more or less for free. That's how you sell email, not like, oh, there is the STMP protocol, and you need to connect to the internet, and all this sort of, nobody cares. And I feel like this is how Bitcoiners talk, and this is how they're trying to sell Bitcoin, of like, oh yes, layer 2 and all these sort of things. Nobody cares.
Yeah, I think it's the same difference between Apple and Samsung. So like Samsung is always like trying to come with the new specification and how it's so cool that you have like this many megapixels and this many cameras and all these things. And then Apple is like, this is a cool phone. They're gonna think you're cool.
Yeah, I mean, nobody knows the difference between a 16 megapixel camera and a 23 megapixel camera. It's just a higher number.
Yeah, exactly. So what would your first like 90-day plan look like at a new Bitcoin startup?
I would definitely I would first like to understand the numbers and the users. So I would like to see their funnel, where are the leads coming from? Where are the app downloads coming from? How is it moving down the funnel or up the funnel? What is the conversion rate? And really understand the numbers, the business numbers. I would then see what is the infrastructure that I talked about. For example, is your app or your website localized? And is it matching your strategy? So if your strategy is that you want to go to Germany, but your product is not translated to German, that is a very obvious shortcoming that you should fix as soon as possible. How is your SEO? Are you actually targeting with your SEO the markets where you want to be active? Like all these sort of things, you really need to do this dirty work before you think about big campaigns and big influencers and ads on Google and all these sort of things. This is what you do after your infrastructure is built. And then you can scale. The thing is that, yes, if you throw 5 million onto the market, you will get something back for sure, some users. But if you build up your infrastructure and then you throw 5 million at it, you will get a lot more back. And most likely you will build something that's sustainable, because if your product is also great and you have a referral program that you have tested and it works, then once you bring people, they will like your product and they will recommend your product, and it starts growing itself. And then that's one channel that works for you. Then you have SEO. When people search for, I want to buy Bitcoin in Hungary, your brand should be one of the top 3 results. When you ask Claude or ChatGPT, where can I, best company to buy Bitcoin in Hungary, your brand should come up there, because that's how people search. People actually don't like ads. Ads are great to add scale to something. Once you already have a good converting funnel and people already are sort of coming to you, you have users, you know that the users like it and they're recommending your product, then you throw money at it and then you scale. If there is a bull market, obviously. I would not recommend doing it in a bear market. It doesn't mean that you cannot grow in a bear market, but obviously you need to be realistic that you will not achieve the same results now as you would do in 2021.
And what are like the basic steps in SEO that you would do, especially now in the AI age? Because I think now we need to take like a different approach than previously.
Yeah, apart from SEO, you also need to now, really look at geo. So your technical setup needs to take care of this as well and address it. And then you really need to pick your lane. Like, what is it that your product is about? What is your moat? And then you build your keyword strategy around that. So, for example, if you are a DCA app, you should really try to build your SEO around the topic of savings and DCA. In terms of being more technical, you would have to ask my SEO expert in my team. I cannot give you all the technical details of how to do it. I can just give you the strategy of what to do it, but how is not something that I can answer. But I think that's kind of the gist of it. You just need to have clarity of what is it that you actually want to achieve, and who are you. Like, how would you describe your business to a friend? And do you even know yourself? Like, do you even know why people like you? Have you done any surveys with your users to understand? Because there also can be this sort of misalignment between what you think you are and what your users think you are. So you might think that, oh, I am great because of this thing. This is why people come to me. And if you never ask them, then you might assume that that's correct, but they might be coming to you for a totally different reason. And the thing that you think is super important is maybe reason 3 or 4 for them. That if it goes away, they maybe wouldn't even care. But if you take away their main reason, then suddenly your funnel dies. So, understanding who you are, who your users are, why they like you, why they use you, what is it that they want from you? What is this job to be done that they get out of you? And if you get that, then you build everything around it. You build your SEO strategy around it. You build your web page around it, your branding and everything else. And I think these are the steps that most, I would say, marketers or companies or startups really skip on, and they go straight away to advertising, for example, or they expect that this is something that can happen really fast. Building up this infrastructure can be a year or 2 until it's really good.
Tudtad, hogy a BitcoinBázisnak van egy saját webshopja is? Na ott tényleg minden megtalálható, ami egy bitcoinernek vagy kriptórajongónak kellhet. Hardware tárcák, könyvek, kiegészítők, meg persze néhány menü ajándék is. Nálunk nem csak forinttal, hanem bitcoinon és altcoinokkal is fizethetsz teljesen biztonságosan. Ráadásul, ha bitcoinnal fizetsz, automatikusan 10% kedvezményt kapsz. Szóval, ha legközelebb hardware tárcát keresel, vagy meglepnél magad valami kriptós cuccal, nézd be a bitcoinbázis.hu/shop oldalra, mert így nem csak magadnak, hanem a podcastnak is segítesz. Can you tell us like one underrated channel that you used in fintech and it worked surprisingly well?
I don't think it's underrated. I talked about influencers. That works really well for Relai. It also worked really well for Bitpanda. I think whatever brand and whatever industry you're in, if you find your niche and you find the voices in your niche, I think you need to get them on your side. And especially in Bitcoin, because it is involving money, what you really are doing is you're trying to create trust at scale. That's what you need. You really need people to trust you. So then you need to understand how people trust me. How can I achieve that people trust me? And it doesn't happen through advertising. And content creators create this trust at scale. Because if you're new to Bitcoin, you want to learn about it. Where do you go to learn about it? You go to a person who talks about it, who has a big following, who explains complicated topics to you. And because you follow them and you learn from them, you trust them. And then if they recommend an app or a product, then you tend to trust that product more. It's the same way as if a friend tells you that you should check out Relay, it's a great app. You're more likely to go and try Relay than if you see an ad that tells you that Relay is great, click on the ad and download the app. Most likely you will ignore the ad, but you will not ignore your friend.
I kind of agree, but for me as a marketer, the holy trinity is rather product, marketing, and customer support. Because with a bad customer support, you can be a stellar marketer and you can have a killer product, but if people are not happy, and things go wrong all the time, there is like, I don't know, they messed up something with the bank transfer, they forgot to put in the reference, or like they accidentally I don't know, sent some of the Bitcoin to another channel or like to a different address, and they don't know how to recover it. If there is a way to recover it, then of course, like the customer support agent's supposed to help with that. But at the same time, if you are not able to do anything with that, but you have still an amazing like customer support team, sometimes these people like can become the brand ambassadors that you were talking about, that's gonna tell their friends like, oh, I was so crazy, like I sent it to a different address, and then I didn't realize that I couldn't get my Bitcoins back, but then they were so nice to me, and then I'm still a customer, and then you should try them too because you can trust them. So
Exactly. I agree with that. Having great support is super important. I personally would put it in the same category as the product, because that's what the person experiences. The person doesn't distinguishes between the product experience and the custom support experience. For them is like, I tried Relay and the product was good. There was a small problem, but in the end, support really helped me. It's a good product. So I categorize it as that's part of the product experience. But you're absolutely right. Support and good support can often really bring back a user who is really frustrated, about to quit on you and leave you a bad review. They can really turn a bad review into a positive one.
and how do you think, like, how involved should marketing be in the product design as well?
I think a product design overall, I think as a startup, everybody should have a say in everyone else's job a little bit, because there is no such a thing as a bad idea, or that, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, this is not your area of expertise. Everybody can have a good point. In terms of marketing's role in product design, I think it's very important, because marketing often has a lot of knowledge and information from the users that product might not have. And also, marketers think like salespeople. They understand the business of growing a product and understand what multiplies and what scales. So you want to have their opinion on a product. In an ideal case, you have product people who are salespeople at the same time. So they also know how to build a product that scales, not just a product that's beautiful, but actually that scales and grows.
And how do you prioritize growth and compliance and branding?
Ideally, you want compliance to not get in the way of growth. And it's very difficult, obviously, when you have a MiCA license and you are licensed and you want to keep your license, then you cannot ignore compliance. But I think it's a constant battle of, compliance says, oh, you cannot do that. You cannot say that. And the mistake is that you say, okay, compliance said I can't say it, so I'm not going to say that. But actually, the conversation should be like, all right, but what if I say this? Or tell me specifically which part of this sentence is the biggest problem, so then I can change it. Or is it that I'm implying this? Because I can change it. I can still make a good message out of this. Just tell me which one is the problem. And this is something that is not obviously the compliance team's fault. It's that the laws are very general. The rules, they have really, and you really need to understand what is the problem, and then you need to push it a little bit. I think you can always find a solution that is compliant, but still is a great marketing message. But the worst thing to say is just like, oh, well, they said we can't, so we're not going to do it. You just need to find a different way. And then if you have a good relationship with your compliance team, then ideally they can show you and tell you what are the absolute no-goes that you can definitely never say and you can never imply. And then everything else is free, and you do what you want as long as you don't go into the red zones. If you have that understanding, then I think it's not really such a big problem, because in any ways you would not actually say, and you wouldn't want to say, a lot of the things that compliance doesn't allow you to say. So for example, I think giving financial advice is not something that we would anyways do. We would never guarantee returns for the user because we know that that's not possible. So there's a lot of things that regulation says that you can absolutely not do, and the reality is that they're just really strict about it, but we wouldn't do it anyways. But we kind of talk about certain things. We kind of talk about the Bitcoin price, but it's not that we are guaranteeing that what it's going to be in the future. We're just talking about the possibilities of how much it can grow, and then you can reframe that message. And the same with brand. I think again, brand just needs to be aware of what is it that you can or can't say. But again, taking it back to just need to know what your customers like and why they care about you, and then the brand needs to reflect that. And I think I don't really like the split of like having brand focus and acquisition focus. I think people don't really make a difference between that. So if I see an ad, I don't see like, oh, this is a performance ad, okay, or this is a brand ad, great. I, I don't see a difference. I just see an ad. So I think this consistency with being a great brand should come across everything, every touch point. You need to be really consistent. You need to really stick to your brand, because it is what creates the relationship with the user. If you are, it's like imagine you meet a person and the person is always acting differently every time you meet them. You would never trust this person. They will be like, oh well, today he was really funny and yesterday he was really serious. I don't know if he's like bipolar or something. I don't understand this person. So the brand needs to always be the same. It needs to, pick a personality that you know that works for you and just embrace it, and don't try to fake it. I really, on X especially, you can really tell the brands that don't know how to do social media because they're just pretending to know social media. They try to copy others. And it's a little bit like that meme with Steve Buscemi where he's like, hello, fellow young kids. Like this is just, it's just a pretender. So I think you need to really create a personality for your brand, embrace it, and then present it everywhere in a very consistent way. Whether it's acquisition, whether it's branding, it doesn't matter. It's always the same person. I like to think of a brand as a person, because you want to have a relationship with the people that you're talking to, and they want to have a relationship with you. And the best example of it is how people love Apple. They just love Apple because it's a great brand. People, there's so many people who think that marketing doesn't work on them, but then they swear by Apple products. I'm like, are you sure marketing doesn't work on you? Because if you like Apple products, marketing works on you 100%.
I used to be an Apple hater, and now here I am with all the Apple products. So it
And
definitely.
they're great products, but the thing is, you have to realize what's going on with Apple. It is marketing. Like Steve Jobs was a great product person and a great marketer. He has created a great product because he had a marketing brain as well, and then he marketed it a really, really clever way, and he created a following. He created a brand that people adore and identify with. And that's something that every brand should really try to create as well, is this relationship. And then you will create a loyal following, and that loyal following will forgive you for lots of mistakes that you might make as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it's. I mean, ideally you have a brand persona, ideally you have like a content style guide, ideally you have a marketing team that is like all on board with this. But sometimes when you join a company, it's like you don't have much of an influence on that, especially if you are like on a lower rank as a marketing manager, or you are just in
Yeah.
social media or something like that. So it's yeah.
I mean, obviously, I think it depends on the company where you work, because if you, like you said, that you are maybe on a more junior position, I think you still have control over your career, and you can decide that I want to work for this company, or I really like this CMO and I want to work for him because I can learn from him, or I believe the way he does things or she does things, and that's within your control. And then if you meet the right company or the right boss, then you can be empowered and you can actually have a say. And I would say this happens quite often in startups. So if that's what you want, I would really recommend startups. Working at a corporation, when you're a junior person, you don't have any say whatsoever. That's the difference. We had, for example, in our social media, we had a person who joined as an intern, and he, within 2 years, became solely responsible for our social media. That kind of a big jump does not happen at a corporate. At a corporate, you would be a junior person or an intern just for 2 years, and then slowly, after several years, you would be given some real responsibility. At a startup, it happens really fast.
Yeah, it's I had the same kind of trajectory. I mean, like I only worked for startups for many years, and then I had the chance to work with like a bigger company that was like a slower moving one. Um, it was very interesting. I felt really out of place, to be honest, especially because every decision was like 25 decision, or like 25 people that you had to agree with, or like you had to go through, and then they would argue on one thing or another, and then you would like take the messaging to compliance. And then I love how, like, in general, as marketing managers, we decided to give headache to compliance for the rest of our lives with the messaging. And yeah, it was very interesting. Definitely, like, I would recommend also to, if you are a junior and if you have the chance to work with a startup, just go for it. Don't go for the bigger company. You can always join like a bigger company later on in your career when you had all your
Exactly.
fun in the startup.
Exactly. I agree with that. Where do you work now?
Well, I'm doing the podcast now, so
Oh, that's your
that's
full-time job now.
well. Yeah, I'm working on a new project that I'm not ready to talk about. It's not bringing in any money yet, but definitely like the listeners will know about it possibly in the next bull market if we get
Is
there.
it related to Bitcoin?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So we shall see. Um, yeah, we still have. It's very early, so I'm not ready to talk about it yet.
That's
But
okay.
yeah.
You
Um,
can, when you're ready, you can just send me a DM on LinkedIn so that I can take a look.
okay. Yeah, I would love that. Thank you. What do you think? Like, which markets will grow like the fastest surrounding Bitcoin in the next 3 to 5 years?
I I think I'm quite bullish on Europe.
Mm.
I think that especially on X, it's quite trendy to shit on Europe. But I think Europe has a huge potential. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have problems, but I think Europe, especially because of what we talked about before, that there's this historical misunderstanding of investing. I think that is slowly changing. It's changing for two reasons. One is everybody's kind of forced to look into it now because of inflation and how terrible the last few years have been. People understand inflation more and people look into their money situation more. That's one thing. So there is this need. And the other thing is that a lot, fintechs have grown a lot over the last 10 years. And they have a huge market share now. And they are really pushing ETFs, for example. So in Germany, which is one of our key markets, there has been a huge increase in ETF savers, and it's actually being it's being mainly driven by the younger people. So when I say younger, I mean younger than 50 years old. So the people who currently are the kind of the biggest earners. And that wasn't the case just like 6-7 years ago. Over the last 6 years, there's been a huge increase of taking money from really boring and safe places like your bank account and moving it to ETFs. That has been happening a lot because of companies like Trade Republic, which is very popular in Germany. All the fintechs like N26 and all these sort of things. That is really helping Europe, in my opinion. And like we talked about before, because this awareness is growing in investing, Bitcoin is also going to grow because you also have lots of Bitcoin fintechs and Bitcoin companies that talk about Bitcoin. So it is very slow, but it is really changing. So I would say, I don't know when it's going to be the next 5 years, but I would say in the next 20 years, Bitcoin is going to explode in Europe. I think overall, a lot more people will be investing in Europe than they are now doing. I can tell you from, I'm 40 years old. In my generation, most people now invest that I know. I still know some people that don't, and are completely clueless when it comes to it. But definitely, there's a higher percentage than in my sister's generation, who is 8 years older than I am, and definitely a lot more than my parents' generation, who are retired. So it is slowly changing where people are realizing that I cannot just rely on the government, because at one point you could do that. You could basically just have a job, and you could, with that job, afford a house with a big garden and 2 cars, and then have a retirement. Now people are realizing that I cannot count on the government anymore. If anything, the government is making this worse. And I cannot rely on just having my money in a bank account. So then they're forced to look into a solution. And that is really good for businesses like ours. I think it's really good for Bitcoin. And that's why I think that Europe is going to be really like, I think it's the market to watch over the next 10 years.
It's very interesting that you highlighted Germany because my peers, I just turned 30, and my peers from Germany, most of my friends there, um, they are pretty much think that the state is gonna take care of them, and then they should expect all this help from the state
Yeah.
and all these things. And it's very, very interesting. Us
I
Eastern
think they
Europe.
will. I think there's a journey. I think when you're still 30, at least for me, what I can tell you, and this is only limited to my experience, once you have children, a lot of your thinking changes, because you kind of go in your thinking, you go from I live for the now. When you don't have kids, all your problems are limited just to you. Life is very simple when you don't have kids. All you have to worry about is yourself and today. But when you become a parent, there is this switch that happens where you suddenly think about the future. And you think about, oh shit, am I doing the best I can for my family? And this is, based on current data, is the late 30s, between 35 and 40, when people are having children right now. So your friends being in the 30s, that might still come as they wake up eventually, because life will force them to look into it, or they realize that they're getting older. That's another thing where you realize that, oh shit, I'm going to be 40 soon, and I would be retiring in 25 years. I don't have money to retire. So I think that is going to happen in these 10 years that your friends are in right now. Whether the luckier ones will realize it in the early 30s, the unlucky ones in the late 30s or 40s. But I think eventually everybody will.
Yeah, it's an interesting like contrast compared to Eastern Europeans, because I think we are in general very critical towards governments, but at the same time we are saving in cash and very cash heavy, and we like to own our houses, which is also can be a disadvantage when it comes to investments. But yeah, it's a very interesting
Yes,
differentiation when it
I
comes to.
think I think Hungary is a good example. I know a little bit about Hungary because of my background. Slovakia is another good example. We don't like our governments, but we also like our governments very much. Uh, Especially, I feel like Eastern European countries are really big on the cult of personality. Big leaders, and who this strong leader is going to carry us, and we'll be fine and safe. So and at the same time they distrust other politicians. So it's very much like a personality driven one. So I agree with you, but I think the instinct to want to own your house is good. And I think it's actually great that in Hungary, for example, but also in Slovakia, there is such a high percentage of homeowners. It's much higher than in lots of Western European countries. The problem is that they think that the job is done. Like I have my house now. I'm fine. That is my investment. I don't need to do anything else. And that is the problem. I think it's almost like they have done this incredible move, which most of the world is struggling now with, which is getting your own house, which is great. But then they're like, and now I'm stopped and I'm not going to do anything else. So if we can teach them to move from, that's great that you have a house. That was a good move. Well done. But you should also still invest your money. If we can teach them that, then I think Eastern Europe is going to explode. It's going to be, look at Poland, for example. Poland is doing really well. And I think all these countries like Hungary, like Slovakia, Czech Republic have a potential to really grow a lot in the next 10 years compared to, you can see what a mess Germany is, for example. So I think there is a potential overall in Europe. I think there's a big potential in Eastern Europe, but it also means that we'd have to wake up a little bit and kick some of the politicians away, which Hungary has done really well recently. And I think other countries should follow suit.
Yeah. Actually, like I wanted to earlier ask you if you are saying that we are underestimating the retail customers that are about to enter the market when you started to talk about Europe in general?
I think so. I think it is. So right now, when you go on X or social media and you see how, people are talking about how this bull market is terrible and it's the worst bull market that they can see, and all I have to tell them that I have been in bear markets where it was, for 2 years brutal. So this is not a terrible bear market. It is just a bear market, and I think once it goes away, the retail will wake up again, and I think every cycle brings more people. Like I see two big, because I joined in 2017. I know that was one time because of the price moving to 20K. That was like a big marketing campaign for Bitcoin. That brought lots of people. But then COVID happened, which was an even bigger marketing campaign for Bitcoin. In 2021, lots of people joined. And I think every cycle brings some sort of an event or just a natural awareness. And there's always more people coming into Bitcoin. So during bear markets, it's just quieter, slower. And during bull markets, it's just gonna grow a lot more and always bigger. Much like the price, the higher highs and higher lows as well, to be honest.
Well, were there any unexpected skills that you have that helped your marketing career so far?
Like I said, I really was into entertainment in my early career, and I was really into the film industry, and I loved the movies, and I was a really big fan of stories. And I think understanding that stories are super powerful in marketing as well, and for brands and companies to tell stories is something that is very underestimated. you know that's why I think branding is super important, and if you do it well and if you tell good stories about the brand, about the founders, that can carry you and that can really separate you from your competition. So being a storyteller is, I think, underrated.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about, but you think our listeners should hear about it, and you think it's important for them to understand your story?
um no, I think not. We covered Europe. Like I said, I'm really bullish on Europe, and I think overall, while it has lots of problems and there's a lot to criticize, I also think that it is like a sleeping giant that is waking up. And I think that does not mean that mistakes aren't happening along the way, but I'm a big believer in people, that we are able to adapt and overcome a lot of adversity. We have shown this throughout history many, many times. And I think I would like people to be equally bullish on Europe and be a little bit more optimistic rather than pessimistic when it comes to where they are and what the future might hold. I think we as Bitcoiners, we often go down the path of criticizing a lot of things around us because we see the potential of how bad it can be. But I think actually, and this is something which is also good advice for brands, I think being the voice of positivity is always better than being the doomsayer. It is always better to be positive and be like, well, things are going to be great. This is what you need to do. Is always better than being like, oh, like do this because otherwise you will end up on the street.
Yeah, fear works on the short run, but if you make a love brand and you make people actually like relate to the brand more, then definitely that can go a long way.
I think if you work with fear, you're not better than any of the mainstream media that we criticize so much, because the reason why mainstream media is the way they are is because of the internet. When internet became the main channel of distribution, they realized that, oh, we need to make money, we need to get clicks, and what makes clicks is always the bad news. The worse the news, the more fantastic the news, the more clicks we get. And that's how basically mainstream media sort of bastardized itself to not even seek the truth, but seek the biggest headline. And now we live in this world where, unfortunately, headlines is all we live for. And that's why journalism is dead, because the internet and the financial models around it kind of killed it. So if we as brands and as marketers will only focus on the negativity, we're no better than the mass media.
That's for sure. I definitely agree with that. So, Imam, thank you so much for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I'm pretty sure that our listeners did too. And any marketer that is entering the field should listen to this episode because you gave very valuable insights to us. And yeah, thank you so much.